Elena cleared her throat, her reflection in the screen showing lines etched deeper than she remembered. This is for you, Daisy. And for Cole. Maybe even for Daniel, if he ever listens. Her voice cracked on his name, a whisper of the man she'd loved and betrayed. Embarrassment flushed her cheeks. Who was she to drag this up now, after decades of careful silence? The family had built a life around the unspoken. Polite dinners, shared glances that skirted the fracture. Her affair, that reckless summer with the painter from the next town over, had shattered her marriage like a wave against the pier. Daniel's quiet withdrawal, Daisy's guarded heart, Cole's wary eyes, they were all echoes of her choice. Keeping it buried had seemed like protection, a way to preserve the boutique's tidy facade, the river's name in this gossipy seaside haven. She paused, fingers drumming the desk. The coffee cup sat there, steam curling from its rim, a ritual she'd shared with Daisy as a girl, black, no sugar, grounding the chaos of mornings. Now it mocked her, warm porcelain against her palm as she lifted it, sipping to steady the shake. The bitterness grounded her, a small anchor in the storm of what-ifs. What if this video unraveled everything? Daisy's therapy sessions, where she preached breaking cycles, would twist into irony. Cole's fragile trust, pieced together after his parents split, might crumble entirely. The fear clawed at her, confession as the final betrayal, undoing the fragile piece she'd stitched from lies. But duty pressed harder, a tide she could no longer outrun. She set the cup down with a soft clink, the sound echoing her resolve. No more justifications, no postponing the truth into oblivion. "I've carried this too long," she said, leaning into the camera, her voice gaining steel. "The affair, it wasn't just a mistake. It broke us, and I've let the silence break us further. You deserve the whole story, not shadows." Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. The choice crystallized. Honesty, however shattering, was the only path forward. As the words flowed, raw admissions of guilt, pleas for understanding, the room felt smaller, the air thicker with possibility. Could this beginning mend what silence had torn, or would it drown them all? She stopped the recording, heart pounding. The draft, no longer hers alone. Meanwhile, the morning fog clung to the windows of Daniel Rivers' modest cottage like a shroud, muting the gray light that filtered into his kitchen. He moved through his routine with the precision of habit, pouring black coffee into a chipped mug, the steam rising in silent spirals, untouched by the chill that had settled in his bones over decades. At 72, retirement had distilled his days to this: the creak of the floorboards, the distant crash of waves against the rocky shore, and the unyielding quiet he had forged as armor. The mail slot rattled softly, a rare intrusion. Daniel paused, his hand steady on the counter, before crossing to retrieve the single envelope. It was plain, addressed in Elena's careful script, his ex-wife's hand, unmistakable after all these years. He held it unopened for a long moment, the paper cool and crisp against his calloused fingers, as if weighing not just its weight, but the fracture it might reopen. With a measured breath, he slid it open. The note inside was brief, tentative, an invitation to the family home for a gathering, words laced with vague hope for reconnecting and shared memories. No mention of the past, of course. That was their pact, etched in the silence that had preserved what little peace remained. Daniel's jaw tightened, the cold detachment he'd cultivated cracking just enough to let suspicion seep in. Was this her guilt resurfacing, or another layer of pretense? He imagined her boutique, shelves of folded linens hiding the tremor in her voice as she penned it. He set the letter down beside his coffee, staring at it as if it were a tide pool, deceptively still. Respond, and the silence shatters. Words tumbling out like stones from a crumbling wall, exposing the raw edges beneath. Ignore it, and the quiet holds, but at what cost? The need to be heard, long buried, stirred faintly, a whisper against the roar of restraint. His fingers hovered over the mug, then withdrew. Not yet. The fog thickened outside, blurring the line between shore and sea. In the end, he folded the note away. The choice deferred like a shadow lengthening into dusk. But the question lingered, unanswered. Was he ready to cross that bridge? Or would the silence claim him once more? Across town, the therapy room smelled of chamomile tea and faint sea salt drifting through the cracked window, a nod to the coastal town beyond. Daisy Rivers sat in her worn armchair, legs crossed, notebook balanced on her knee like a shield. Around her, the group of 8 formed a loose circle, strangers bound by invisible scars, their faces lit softly by the afternoon fog filtering through lace curtains. She smiled, measured and warm, the therapist's mask fitting as snugly as her wool sweater. Relational trauma often repeats like waves on the shore, she began, her voice steady, a gentle current guiding them. It erodes trust, not in one crash, but in the quiet pull back and forth. Think of a pattern, a parent's silence after betrayal, how it echoes into your own hesitations. What happens when those waves build unseen? A woman in her 40s, eyes rimmed red, nodded first. My mother hid her affairs for years. I swore I'd never do the same. But now I catch myself lying to my partner about small things. It's like I'm drowning in her choices. The group murmured agreement, voices layering like fog. Daisy listened, her pen scratching notes. Objective, clinical, but inside, anxiety coiled tight, managed by years of practice. Breathe in the salt air, exhale the storm. Her mother's face flickered unbidden, Elena's poised smile at family gatherings, the boutique's polished facade hiding cracks. The invitation had come that morning, a simple card from her mother. Come for coffee. We need to talk. It sat now in Daisy's bag, a weight pulling at the edges of her calm. Another participant spoke, a young man with trembling hands. My divorce. It's my dad's infidelity all over again. I see it in how I push people away. Silence just makes it worse, right? Like pretending the tide isn't rising. Daisy nodded, her smile unwavering. Exactly. Patterns demand we name them, or they repeat. But as she spoke, the words twisted inward. Elena's secrecy, the affair that shattered the marriage, left Daisy navigating a minefield of half-truths. How many times had she replayed it? The fights whispered behind doors, the way trust curdled like milk left too long, anxiety sharpened, a blade against her ribs. She reached for her coffee cup on the side table, the porcelain warm from the radiator below. Steam curled up, carrying the bitter scent of black brew, a ritual she'd shared with Elena since childhood. Sipped in tense silences, secrets swirling unsaid. Her fingers tightened around the handle, knuckles whitening. The group watched her, expectant. One more voice. But confessing, it floods everything. What if the truth destroys what's left? Daisy's throat closed. Fury cracked through the anxiety, like lightning splitting fog. Raw, shattering. Elena's lies had shaped her. Forged this mistrust she now dissected for others. How dare she invite talk now, after decades of burial? The cup trembled in her grip, hot liquid sloshing near the rim, threatening spill. She set it down carefully, voice still even. That's the risk. But unacknowledged waves, they swallow us whole. Internally, the dam fractured. She imagined storming to the boutique, demanding answers. Yet here, in this circle, she observed her own unraveling, the professional line blurring. How long could she hold the tide without it claiming her too? A few days later, the morning fog clung to the windows of Elena's boutique like a reluctant secret, muting the coastal light into a soft, gray haze. She set the 2 porcelain cups on the scarred oak table in the back room, the steam rising from the dark brew like whispers from buried years. Cole arrived on time, as always, his sneakers quiet on the wooden floor, his backpack slung low, eyes flicking to the shelves of folded linens and forgotten trinkets. "Grandma," he said, sliding into the chair opposite her. His voice held that teenage edge, wary, testing the air between them. She poured for him first, the ritual they had built over summers. Black coffee for her, a splash of milk for him, no sugar. The cup warmed her palms as she passed it over, its faint rattle against the saucer betraying her own unease. "How's school?" she asked, aiming for normalcy, but the words tasted thin. Cole wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into the liquid as if it held answers. The steam curled up, carrying the rich, grounding scent that always reminded her of mornings in the old family cabin, before everything cracked. He took a sip, then set it down too carefully. "It's fine, but I keep thinking about Mom and Dad, the way they fought before the divorce. It still feels like tremors, you know? Like the ground's not solid anymore." Elena's chest tightened, a familiar guilt uncoiling. She wanted to shield him, to wrap this moment in the illusion of steadiness. But his gaze, perceptive, probing, pinned her. He wasn't accusing. He was searching, a boy adrift in echoes of adult fractures, needing proof that the family could bend without breaking. "Tremors," she echoed softly, her own cup hovering near her lips, untouched. The warmth seeped into her fingers, a small anchor against the pull of her unspoken weight. "I've seen you sad before," Cole continued, his voice dropping, almost hesitant. "When I was little, visiting the house, you'd stare out at the sea like it owed you something. Is it happening again? More cracks?" The question hung there, internal storm brewing behind her composed smile. Honesty clawed at her. The confession tape hidden upstairs, the affair's shadow that had rippled through Daisy, through him. But to unload now might topple his fragile world. She set her cup down, the porcelain clinking like a confession's first syllable. "Life does crack us, Cole. Your parents, it hurt them, and that hurt you. I won't pretend it's easy." Her voice softened, the wariness in her posture easing as she leaned forward, vulnerability cracking her defenses. "But we're still here, pouring coffee, talking. That matters." He met her eyes then, the tension in his shoulders loosening just a fraction. A tentative openness bloomed between them, fragile as the fog lifting outside. He nodded, lifting his mug again, and they sat in the quiet ritual, the steam bridging their silence. Could she carry the truth without stripping away his footing? The question lingered, unanswered, in the warmth of the cup she finally sipped. Tensions simmered, until one afternoon, Daisy pushed open the door to Elena's boutique, the bell tinkling like a hesitant confession. The air hung heavy, with the scent of lavender sachets and polished wood, but her mother's workspace in the back room felt off, cluttered, as if secrets had spilled over. She had come to drop off a forgotten scarf, but curiosity tugged her toward the laptop glowing on the desk. Its screen paused on a video file labeled draft. Her thumb hovered, then clicked play. Elena's face filled the frame, weary lines etched deeper than Daisy remembered. Her voice steady, but laced with regret. I've carried this too long. The affair, the lies that followed, it broke us, and I let it shape you without a word. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Daisy's chest. She froze, the remote slipping from her hand. When Elena emerged from the stockroom, balancing 2 steaming mugs, Daisy was already standing, arms crossed like a barrier. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Elena halted, the coffee cups trembling slightly in her grip. She set them down on the counter with deliberate care, the porcelain clinking softly, a ritual they both knew, mornings mended over bitter brew. But today, the warmth rising from the cups did nothing to thaw the chill between them. "Daisy, it's not ready. Not for you." "Not ready?" Daisy's voice was measured at first, the therapist's poise she wore like armor. She gestured to the laptop, her fingers steady, despite the knot twisting inside. "You've been scripting your big reveal. About Dad? About everything you buried so we could all pretend?" Elena's eyes darted to the screen, then back, her posture straightening into that familiar defensive grace. "I was going to tell you properly. This is just me trying to make sense of it. To own it. Own it." The distance cracked. Daisy's hands clenched, her breath sharpening as old echoes surged. Nights of whispered arguments filtering through thin walls, the way trust had frayed like an old seam. Not accusation, but exhaustion seeped in, raw and unfiltered. "All these years, you've protected us by saying nothing? Or protected yourself? I see patients every day, Mom, unraveling the same silences, patterns repeating, like waves eroding the shore. And now this, a video, as if hitting record absolves the cost." Elena reached for her mug, fingers wrapping around its curve as if anchoring herself. The steam curled upward, carrying the faint, comforting aroma of roasted beans, a vessel for words too hot to hold. "I thought silence was kindness, keeping the peace, but it's poisoned us, hasn't it? You, Cole, even your father. I can't unmake the past, Daisy, but hiding it, that's what let it fester." The words hung, a flash of pain blooming in Daisy's eyes, her controlled facade shattering into something vulnerable, tears pricking unbidden. She stepped closer, the counter no longer a divide. "And if you say it out loud, what then? We shatter for good? Or does your honesty fix the pieces you've ignored?" Elena met her gaze, the coffee cup midway to her lips, untouched. The question lingered in the steam, unanswered, as the boutique's quiet pressed in, demanding more than either could yet give. Soon after, the old pier creaked under their hesitant steps, a weathered spine jutting into the gray Atlantic. Elena arrived first, her coat pulled tight against the chill wind that carried the sharp tang of salt. She gripped the railing, knuckles pale, as if anchoring herself to the wood could steady the tremor inside. Daniel approached from the far end, his footsteps measured, face etched with the lines of a man who had long mastered containment. The invitation letter burned in his pocket like an unanswered question, but he said nothing of it yet. They stood side by side, not touching, the space between them vast as the horizon. Waves lapped at the pilings below, a rhythmic murmur that filled the silence first. "You came," Elena said finally, her voice low, stripped of warmth. It was a statement, cold as the spray misting their faces. Daniel nodded, eyes fixed on the sea. The letter, it stirred things. His words hung flat, guarded, the stoicism she'd known for decades wrapping him like fog. No accusations, just the weight of what wasn't said. The air thickened with brine, seeping into their clothes, their skin, a reminder of summers long buried, when betrayal had first salted their wounds. Elena turned to him, her breath catching. "I've been recording it all. The truth. About us. About what I did." The confession edged out. Vulnerable, her defenses cracking, like the pier's splintered boards. She didn't plead. She simply let the words spill, raw and unadorned. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened, the salt air pulling at memories he'd sealed away, the sting of discovery, the quiet unraveling of their life. The waves surged higher now, foam cresting white against the posts, mirroring the churn in his chest. Cold detachment gave way to something sharper, a trembling ache that made his hands clench. "All these years," he murmured, voice fracturing just enough. "The silence. It's been my shield, but it blinds us both." She reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve, but he didn't pull away. The seawater sprayed up, cool droplets tracing paths down their cheeks like unshed tears. Had the quiet become too heavy for him? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as the waves whispered on, urging truths to surface from the depths. The culmination arrived at the dining room, in the old river's house, glowed under the soft amber of pendant lamps, casting long shadows across the lace tablecloth. Steam rose from platters of roasted cod and potatoes, mingling with the salty tang of the sea air, drifting through open windows. Elena sat at the head, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of her napkin. Across from her, Daisy picked at her food, her therapist's poise fraying at the edges. Daniel, invited back after decades of distance, occupied his old seat with stoic stillness, his eyes fixed on the flickering candle. Cole, the grandson bridging their fractured generations, slouched quietly at the end, his teenage gaze darting between them like a sentinel. The conversation had skirted the edges of memory, polite reminiscences of summers past, until Elena could bear it no longer. Her heart pounded with a tense hope, a fragile belief that naming the shadow might finally let light in. She reached for her coffee cup, the porcelain warm against her palm, its steam curling like unspoken words. The ritual of it grounded her, a vessel for the bitterness she was about to pour out. "I need to say this," Elena began, her voice steady, but laced with the weight of years. "All those years ago, during the summer of '78, I had an affair. It broke us, broke you all, and I've carried that silence like a stone in my chest." No excuses rose to her lips, only the raw admission, clear as the waves crashing beyond the walkway. The room froze. Daisy's fork clattered against her plate, her face twisting from shock to fury. "You what?" she whispered, then louder. "After everything? You hid this poison and let it seep into us?" Her chair scraped back as she stood, eyes blazing with the pain of inherited distrust. Without another word, she stormed out, the door slamming like a thunderclap, leaving the echo of her footsteps fading into the fog-shrouded night. Cole's eyes widened, but he didn't move, his quiet watchfulness absorbing the fracture, the way the family's fragile peace splintered before him. Daniel's jaw tightened, yet something softened in his gaze, a crack in the stoic wall as he met Elena's eyes for the first time in years. Elena set the coffee cup down, its faint clink the only sound breaking the hush. Relief flickered through her, mingled with the shattering pain of the wound reopening. The truth hung in the air, heavy as the ocean's roar. Would it conquer the fear of ruin or drag them all under? In the quiet aftermath, Daniel's hand hovered over the phone on the kitchen table, the wood scarred from years of absent-minded mornings. The fog outside pressed against the window like an uninvited memory, and he could almost taste the salt from the pier, their pier, where he'd met Elena days ago, words finally spilling like waves eroding stone. That encounter had cracked something in him, a rigid shell forged over decades. Now, dialing Daisy's number felt like stepping into the surf, bracing for the cold pull. She picked up on the third ring, her voice clipped, professional. "Dad, everything all right?" He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the empty house. Restraint had been his armor, steeling him against the betrayal's echo. But it had only sharpened the edges of their lives, turning silence into a blade that cut deeper with time. "Daisy," he began, his tone steady as a horizon. "I need to talk about your mother." A pause, heavy as the tide. He heard her shift, perhaps in her office, surrounded by the tools of empathy she wielded so carefully for others. "What about her? After that dinner?" "I know." His words came measured, each one a concession. The anger he'd nursed wasn't protection, it was a cage, locking them all in place, recalling the pier's damp planks underfoot, the sea's relentless murmur, urging truths forward. He pressed on. "I've been unyielding. My silence didn't shield us. It just let the hurt fester, like salt water seeping into wounds we pretended weren't there." Daisy's breath caught, a soft fracture in the line. "You mean all these years? Defending the quiet like it was some noble pact?" "Not defending," he corrected gently, the steel in his voice softening, edges rounding like pebbles tumbled by the ocean. Vulnerability crept in, cautious as dawn breaking fog, acknowledging. "Elena's trying to own what she did, to mend what's broken, and I think we should let her. Not forgive blindly, but give her the space to try. For all of us." The line hummed with her silence now, internal storms brewing behind it. Would his words reach her, pull her from the resentment's undertow? He waited, heart steady but hopeful, the sea's whisper lingering in his mind, a reminder that some currents could carry them toward shore, if only they didn't fight the flow. Days passed before the bell above the boutique door tinkled softly as Daisy pushed it open, the scent of lavender sachets and aged wood greeting her like an unwelcome memory. Elena's shop, with its racks of linen dresses and shelves of forgotten trinkets, felt smaller today, hemmed in by the coastal fog pressing against the windows. Daisy had come unannounced, her therapist's notebook clutched like a shield. But now, scanning the empty counter, doubt coiled in her chest. The confession video, drafted, rejected, buried on Elena's old laptop, had haunted her since the draft discovery. Why revisit it now, when anger still simmered? She moved behind the counter, fingers tracing the familiar grooves of Elena's desk. There, amid invoices and a half-empty jar of seashells, sat the laptop, screen dark. Daisy's breath hitched. She powered it on, the fan's hum a tentative whisper. The file icon glowed. For Daisy, MP4. Bitter distrust surged. Another manipulation. Elena's way of rewriting history without facing her. Daisy's hand hovered, pulse thudding in her ears. She could delete it, walk away, preserve the wall she'd built brick by bitter brick. But the shop's quiet pressed in, and she clicked play. Elena's face filled the screen, pale under the soft lamplight of her living room. No makeup, no poised smile, just lines etched deep by years, unspoken. "Daisy," her voice began, raw and unsteady. "If you're watching this, I've failed to say it face to face. The affair, it wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was my unraveling. I chose silence to protect you, to keep our world from shattering, but it poisoned everything. I see it now, in your guarded eyes, in the way you flinch from trust. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm owning the fracture I caused. Daisy's throat tightened, fists clenching on the desk. Lies, she thought. Defensive, always shifting blame to circumstance. But Elena's words flowed on, unadorned. Details of stolen afternoons by the pier, the guilt that choked her nights, the lie she'd told herself that burying it would heal them all. No justifications, no pleas for pity. Just a mother's voice, cracking under the weight of regret, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. The emotion vector shifted, unbidden. Daisy's distrust, that old bitter root, began to quiver. Not dissolve, but tremor, like the first crack in frost under tentative sun. She sank onto the stool, eyes fixed on the screen, as Elena whispered, "I love you enough to stop hiding. The truth isn't a weapon. It's the only bridge left." A coffee cup caught her eye on the counter. Elena's favorite, chipped porcelain, steam no longer rising, but stained with the ghosts of morning rituals. Daisy reached for it absently, fingers wrapping around its warmthless curve, as if it could hold the confession's fragile heat. The video ended, screen fading to black, leaving the shop's silence heavier, charged. Was this sincerity, raw enough to breach her walls, or just another echo of the past, demanding she decide? Daisy's chest rose and fell, a single tear escaping as the fog outside thickened, blurring the line between holding on and letting go. Finally, the late afternoon light filtered through the boutique's lace curtains, casting elongated shadows across the polished wooden counters where Elena arranged her latest shipment of porcelain teacups. Her hands moved with the mechanical precision of habit, but her mind churned like the tide beyond the shop window, pulling back only to surge forward again. The confession at dinner had spilled out like salt water, raw and stinging, and now the silence that followed felt heavier than the fog rolling in from the sea. Daisy had stormed out, her footsteps echoing like accusations on the creaking porch. Daniel's guarded nod had offered no balm, and Cole, sweet, watchful Cole, had simply watched, his young face a mask of quiet fracture. What if her words had only deepened the chasm? What if this desperate bid for truth had severed the last fragile threads to her grandson, confirming she was the irredeemable shadow at the family's core? Elena paused, fingers trembling as she set down a cup. The fear coiled in her chest, a broken caution that whispered she should have let the past stay buried, like driftwood under sand. Her reflection in the glass cabinet stared back, lines etched by decades of perfection's facade, now cracked. She turned away, wiping her hands on her apron, when the bell above the door tinkled softly. Not a customer, but the faint scrape of sneakers on the threshold. Cole stood there, hoodie zipped to his chin, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He didn't speak, didn't meet her eyes at first. The air between them hummed with unspoken currents, the boutique's scent of lavender sachets and aged varnish doing little to soften it. He lingered by the counter, gaze drifting to the seashells she'd collected years ago, remnants from family walks along the walkway, their pearled curves holding the ocean's hush. Elena's heart stuttered. She wanted to reach out, to ask if he hated her now, if the waves of her betrayal had drowned whatever trust he'd clung to. But the words stuck, internal tension twisting like a knot in her throat. Without a sound, Cole pulled something from his pocket, a small, spiral shell, its surface etched by the sea's patient grind, still carrying the faint brine of the shore. He placed it gently on the counter, right beside the teacup she'd been holding, as if anchoring it there. His fingers lingered for a beat, then withdrew. A ghost of a smile flickered on his lips. Not reassurance, but something purer. Belief, unforced. He turned toward the door, pausing only to glance back, his eyes holding hers just long enough to spark a question in the air. Did this mean he still saw a path through the wreckage? That her grandmother's role wasn't erased? The bell tinkled again as he slipped out into the fading light. Elena stared at the shell, its cool weight under her palm as she traced its ridges. The broken caution in her chest began to fracture further, giving way to a natural hope, tentative as the first clear morning after storm. It wasn't absolution, not yet, but a sign that the story's waves hadn't stilled. In the corner of the shop, through the half-open door to the back room, Daisy watched from the shadows, her silhouette still, a quiet observer, as the bridge between them began to hum with possibility. The truth, like the ocean in that shell, persisted, refusing to sink under silence's weight.